Firstly, I'd like to thank everyone for coming along today. Distinguished guests, Officer Commanding C Company 5, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to read to you some extracts from John's book, The Battle of Sidi Nazir. The World War II Battle of Sidi Nazir held the entire North Africa campaign in the balance. The Allied troops were ordered to delay the German 10th Panzer Division for 1 day, allowing Allied reinforcements to be brought forward to protect vital supplies. Failure would have split the Allied armies, cutting them off entirely from vital supplies for the German Afrika Korps. It was their last roll of the dice. An entire Panzer Division, equipped with the newly seemingly unstoppable Tiger tanks, thrust deep into the Allied lines, and all that faced them were 2 territorial army battalions, completely untested, in battle, and equipped only with mines, Bren guns, and howitzers. This vivid personal account of that fateful day is given by Private John Abramides Military Medal, and appeared in the Royal Hampshire Regimental Journal in 2011. It gives the account of a Bren gunner ordered to defend a minefield and hold it to the death. From eyewitness statements from survivors and reports received by wireless during the battle, there is no doubt that this action was an epic which can seldom have been excelled for heroism and devotion to duty, as all ranks fought magnificently to the death. Some extracts from the book. Also, after 1,700 hours, the officer commanding B Company reported that his strength was now around 30 men, that the enemy were closing in on him, and that they were round behind his right or southern flank. No further report was received from this company, and no single officer or man came back. From eyewitness survivors and reports received during this battle, there is no doubt that this action was an epic which can seldom have been excelled for heroism and devotion to duty. All ranks fought magnificently and to the death. The Royal Hampshire Regimental Journal, August 1947. I'd like to give an extract from the German Panzer Division commander, Oberst Rudolf Lang, commander of the 10th Panzer Division North Africa Corps. Contact with the enemy was made along the mountain ridges east of Sidi Nazir, a swampy spot in the road along rocky slopes that had been infested with the most carefully camouflaged mines, so that the first Panzer tanks going through would be immobilised and blocking the road. This led to heavy artillery and mortar fire being excellently directed our way from many favourable observation posts in the mountains. Panzer pioneers sent forward were unable to clear the minefield or get the immobilised leading Panzer tanks going again. This was because sheafs of fire coming in from the machine guns well positioned to our flanks were mowing down every single man. Our failure at Sidi Nazir and Hunt's Gap marked the end of our hopes of victory in North Africa. German Afrika Korps commander talking to Brigadier Grayman after the war. Right, a little bit about John Abramides now. The first engagement. We did not wait long till German soldiers, minesweepers, came forward to the minefield. The officer on my right started counting the men coming through. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And John says, I remember something about 14. My officer started pushing me, saying, come on, soldier, what do you think you're doing? When are you going to fire at them? I was waiting, wondering how many would come, and I was taking aim and deciding where I would get them. In the end, I fired on the rear soldier in front of the first tank, and I kept my fire on that spot. And as I fired, they ran back. I kept my fire steady, and as they ran, I was getting them. They were all just running back in a straight line because it was a minefield, and they ran back into my line of fire, many falling on one top of one of the other. Some of them They had a lot more bullets than 1 or 2 or 3. They had more because they were falling in the direction of my fire. It was a massacre. It was terrible. Then the shelling started. The German tanks shelled again and again. They had 88mm guns on the tanks, and it shook the hill up. When a shell hit the rock underneath my position, your stomach went up into your mouth. My watch fell to pieces, the mechanism rattled inside, then the same with the sergeant's radio. The vibration, it was terrible. My helmet, I don't know what was hitting it, but every time something exploded, I would have to pick it up and put it back on again. When I looked at it afterwards, it was bent and dented everywhere. I wish I could have brought it back, as nobody would believe that whoever was wearing that helmet could have survived. Just to show you how dogged John was. The officer then told us to cease fire and bug out of the area. I can't do that, sir. My orders are to stay here till I am dead, or I've run out of ammunition. He told me his guns were good, and to leave the firefight to them, but I told him his guns would not stand against the German tanks once they were through the minefield. He even threatened to court-martial me. One of many, I might add in a second. Haven't you been told to obey the last officer's orders? He asked. I had been told that, but this is different. You are 25-pounders. Me, I'm infantry. So John stood there. He stayed his ground. What I want to say about John, I've got some anecdotes of John's. What's really important. When everybody was moving out of the area because the Germans were overrunning the ground that they were on, imagine they're in rocky outcrops on 2 flanking slopes scattered around the area at Sid in his ear. They couldn't dig full-size trenches because it was a rocky outcrop, so they could only go down to about half the body size. So their defensive positions, they weren't very good. So the Germans moving in, coming in with the Panzer tanks with the 88mm, they were smashing right into them. The elite infantry paratroopers and the German Panzer infantry were closing in on them too. At this stage, most of the battalion had been taken out. And so John was surrounded by his lost comrades out on the ground. When he told this officer to go and that he was going to stay, he'd made that decision that he was going to fight to the last. That was his remit. They had to defend that position till 5 o'clock the next day, and John wasn't going anywhere. So what did he do? He decided he was going to fight his own guerrilla campaign. And in that, what he did, in the time that he had, he went and prepared 10 different fire positions in an arc of fire, and he dug little shell scrapes, and he went and crawled out from his position, and he rounded up as much ammunition as he could, as much weapon systems that he could, and he placed them in all these different key positions with a bit of water and a bit of food, because he knew he was in for a long shift. And as the Germans came at him, he started taking them out with his gun, and then the Germans thought, right, that's where he is. And then when they sent in another team to get him, he'd moved position. So he was setting up ambushes left, right and centre. And this is how John survived, because every time the Germans came in to get him, the elite panzers, the elite paratroopers, which in his words were, "Poof, who were they?" And he was taking them out, and they were getting sick of him. So they sent the commanding officer forward through the minefield, and he asked John to just surrender. And John said, "Sir, I can't surrender because I've got to hold this position." He goes, "But I don't want to kill you, so please surrender." He said, "I can't." So off the officer goes through the minefield, goes back to the first tank, and he's talking to his officer in the tank, and the officer pops out his turret, and he's obviously trying to show the officer where John is. So John spots this. The officer picks up his binos and he's looking for John, so John just shoots him, and the officer just goes over. Right? And just before that, before the officer bugged out of his trench, John had said to the officer, "We are being watched by the local natives on top of that hill." And he said, "Yeah, well, what do you want me to do about it?" He goes, "Well, we can't have them watching us because they're giving our positions away." So he goes, "Well, what are you going to do?" He goes, "Well, I'm going to take them out." He goes, "You take them out, I'll court-martial you." So what do you think John did? He took them out. Because later on it was found that they were wearing German trench coats, so they were spotting for the Germans. John was ruthless in battle. He had to be. and the regiment, the battalion, were ruthless in battle. And I think the Germans thought that it was going to be a walkover. They thought they were going to absolutely blast through that position, but they didn't. What I will say about John is that to be in that position on his own, through the night, knowing that they were sneaking up on him from every angle, that must have been quite something to experience, knowing that he was the last man. And when you think about the elite panzers and you think about the elite paratroopers, in my opinion, the actions of that battalion, who were untested, what a brotherhood, what a band of brothers, because they knew that it was like their Rorke's drift. It was the last stand. They were in a suicide mission. And I've been fortunate enough in my time in service. I went to Gloucester Valley in South Korea when I was serving there, where the glorious Gloucesters defended that position. And I'd put this alongside that, because the 5th Battalion, standing up against the elite and the mass and the weaponry of the Panzer Division, how they held them up for 48 hours is so significant that I cannot believe to this day that there isn't more coverage of this battle, because that battle was extremely significant in history. Because if the Hampshires hadn't have held Hunt's Gap and the Germans had got through, then they would have broke through the lines, and that could have changed the whole face of the Africa campaign. And John said to me in our conversations, the Germans say that they won that battle, but they didn't, because if they'd won the battle, then they would have won the objective, and the objective was to get through, but they didn't get through in time, because by the time they did get through and break through, the defensive lines had been formed by the reinforcements coming up behind Sid and Azir. So it was a complete success. But the battalion were decimated. And what I want to say, John Abramides was a Territorial Army soldier, part of this family. And when John died, it was very important to me that we made sure that he came back home. And in my opinion, he's coming back home. And I just want to read something that he said on the ship coming home. And it will show you his pride in his regiment. On the boat coming home, I met a major who was at Hunt's Gap with the Tank Corps. He was returning to England to prepare for the second front. A captain had said that they wanted a hairdresser and a barber. Not forgetting John was a barber. I did not think I could do it as I was feeling really weak and tired. I did not feel I could stand long enough, but I was persuaded to try and help another barber, a Scotsman, and I earned about £20 in 5 days. Ever the businessman. One day a major wanted a haircut, and as I was cutting his hair, we talked. I told him I was in the Hampshire Regiment. As I was brushing him down afterwards, he asked me which battalion I was in, and I told him I was in the 5th. And immediately he embraced me and said, "Ah, the 5th Hampshires, a fine battalion, the best battalion in the British Army." I told him I was the Bren gunner who defended that minefield, and he was delighted. He explained that he had arrived at Hunt's Gap with time to get his tanks and guns in position, including a 17-pounder. He said that the guns were dug in low down beside the road, and they told his men to eat their rations and then rest until the Germans arrived. They were told not to fire until he gave the order, because he wanted the Germans to get in close. The 17-pounder gunners were ordered to focus all of their fire on the Tiger tanks, and in a few days he said they were back holding the positions that were so gallantly defended at Sydney Azir by the 5th Hampshires. I'd just like to read a poem that I chose for John. It's very difficult trying to find a poem for a hero, someone that you've become very close to, that you admire and respect, and you've tried to understand what it must have been like to see all your mates being taken out, and you're the last one left. The poem's aptly called "I'm a Soldier," a poem for a hero, John Abramides, Military Medal. I am a soldier. My heart is in the land. I fight for life and freedom as I walk along the sand. I do not walk unworthy. I will not stand alone. The angels travel with me. I fight for land and home. I am a soldier, a daddy and a friend. a comrade and a brother, a warrior to the end. I do not walk unknowing the risk upon the way, that God travels with me each and every day. Now I'd just like to pay a tribute to C Company, 3rd Battalion, Princess of Wales Royal Regiment. When John came up to his 100th birthday, he was so gutted that he'd not had any association with his regiment for all those years. And we needed to do something about that. And before that, every time I was in his company, I'd get earache about he wanted the Italy Star, because when he went on the run in Italy, they couldn't catch him. He jumped off the train, did his escape and evasion routine, produced false ID papers, got captured by the Germans, and they thought he was a farmer, so they let him go. And he made it all the way to the British lines. And he was able to brief them up on the positions of the German enemy. And it really helped them. But the one thing he nagged me about was that Italy Star. He believed he was entitled to it. And I wasn't aware that if you were a prisoner in Italy, you weren't entitled to it. But if you were on a nominal role within a regiment and you were serving there, you were entitled to it. And that bugged me, so I started trying to look into it. And what was significant is that he wanted his letter from the Queen. How many people can say that they had a letter from the King and a letter from the Queen in their lifetime? That's quite remarkable, really. And so, on his 100th birthday, he didn't know that I'd worked behind the scenes to organise for Captain Phillimore to come up. And so I stayed out of the house, I stayed away, and the Queen's letter came. Yeah, he was overjoyed about that. But you know what he was more bothered about? That he wanted his regiment there on his big day. So when Clive turned up, it couldn't have been a more momentous moment for John. And the pictures that we have of that moment will live forever, because he felt like a tiger again. He was so proud of his regiment, so proud of the men he so gallantly fought with. And let's not forget that battalion. They were all brave, they were all heroes. I'm a Coldstream Guard, but you know what? The Hampshires, what a regiment. And what was unique is that when John sadly passed away, Clive got in touch with me and they organised a proper military send-off. Fit for a hero. And as an ex-guardsman, I've attended funerals to bury people that we've lost, but I've never seen it as professionally done as Clive's boys did on that day. They gave John an amazing send-off. And I'd like to thank the Commissar Major, Rob Phillips, because at the funeral, I was telling him about the Italy Star, and Rob, in typical Tiger fashion, got stuck into this. So he went and got a grip of the medal office, and he got John's Italy Star. And so what I decided to do was try and produce a fitting tribute to Clive and his men, the men of this company and women of this company, to give you something that's part of John, that can live in this barracks forever. Because if there's ever a company that deserves to have John Abramides Military Medal in this barracks, it's everybody here. So what I've done, I commissioned a piece. It's a wonderful framed piece as a tribute to John. And in that piece, the wood is made from Italian oak, because that's where he escaped and that's where a family helped him. The inside of the frame and the outside of the frame is in khaki, which is to resemble his uniform that he wore at the time. He's got his citation for his medal, and he's got his King's letter in there. It's got a shelled and battered Sidi Nazir station, which was the battalion HQ during the battle. And it's got a wonderful picture of John in there. Also in there is Coldstream Guard's tunic cloth with his medals mounted on it, because he liked the fact that I'd served in the Coldstream Guards. So, what I'd like to do is call out the officer commanding. I've got a little something for Major Richardson from the Coldstream Guards to place alongside John's frame. May I have your permission to carry, sir, please? I'd like to present this to Major Richardson, as a token of my appreciation for everything C Company have done for John and the Abramides family. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.